Bonsoir à tous et à tous. Merci.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for getting settled in so that we can begin our session. I'm François Langlais, and I will be moderating this session, whose theme is, do we still know how to dream collectively? So we have Pierre Lecasse, who is an economist, professor of university, and part of the Valais Centre, a member of the Circle, and Sybille Velle, who's part of the Radio France group. Sophie Joisson, who's mayor of Aix-en-Provence, who's joining us. Stéphane Richard, who's president of the OM Football Club, and Volk Richter, who is director of a theatre in Berlin. Thank you for being with us. And Pierre, you will be opening the ball to set the scene for a few minutes. Then we will have a quick discussion on the around the round table. Pierre, the floor is yours. I'm going to begin with a brief introduction, necessarily brief, and with 3 comments and observations around this very interesting theme, and very complicated, and which touches a broad variety of subjects at different levels. My first observation is that the time of big hope is no longer, and has turned around. And we live in a world where, when we question the citizens, we come up with some very astonishing figures. For example, practically 90% of French people believe France to be in decline. So, of course, France are the world champions of pessimism. But when we go to other countries and we do the same surveys, the figures are not that different. Even more interesting and even more striking, when we asked the French whether they were in agreement with the idea according to which civilization would collapse, 65% agreed, or rather agreed. 65% therefore are collapsists. They are partisans of collapsology, which we call it today, which is a very big movement. We can also find clues in the fact that, novels, films, cartoons are all filled with dystopia, and we practically no longer see any utopia anywhere. And we can even add that the apocalypse is trendy. I even heard that in specialized environments, we no longer call it apocalypse, but we call it an apo. You're in an apo. And it's become a whole new profession. So this very dark, somber, pessimistic vision is truly englobing, and it is fundamentally dangerous because these dark visions are self-realizing, because this affects investment, of course. It heavily affects demography. And one of the reasons why in many countries and everywhere demography is in decline, because when we ask women, hope is no longer there, and that's why demography is plunging. But this is also true not just for demography, but for democracy. Populism is on the rise, very precisely side by side with the surrounding pessimism. So this is a very particular situation. It is a wave of pessimism. This, is something we might question, just as people were questioning in the 30s, a wave of pessimism. Or is it even more serious? Is it a secular or even multi-secular regime? Another regime of which would take us into another era. And that was my first observation. My second observation is that it's all very well to say dream collectively, but we're not cuddly teddy bears. There are collective dreams that have been disastrous. And that's a very old story. The Matrix, to some extent, is medieval millenarism, or that of the modern times, meaning the belief that after the apocalypse there will be the kingdom of God on earth for 1,000 years. And if we set off from that postulate, it is actually the kingdom of the just. And if it's the kingdom of the just, all those who are not just must be eliminated. And in particular, they went to Munster, a small town in Westphalia, in Germany, of course. And that is the matrix. But when we look at what happened in the 19th and 20th centuries in the world, we can see that communism has a very close relationship with this millenarist vision. And this is also a belief in a kingdom. And the kingdom was open, of course, if not to everybody, at least those who were aligned. And we found the same tragedy, or more or less the same tragedy, with new terms, but it ended in a disastrous manner. But we can take a step further, that it's not just the kingdom that is a dangerous dream. We can all see that dreams of unlimited growth, of growing productivity, the dreams of technical progress are collective dreams that are very strong, very powerful, which were characteristic of mankind, in particular since the 18th century. The 18th century carried over to the 19th century, and it collapsed in the 20th, but which gave rise to rather tragic consequences. So today, and since the 40s, mankind has achieved the possibility of self-destructing. It hasn't done it yet, but only a short lapse of time has gone by. And the use of the atomic bomb is hanging over our heads as a supreme fear. And we can see also that productivism gave a yield to very disastrous results. It was all very good to dream of growing productivity, but actually it boomeranged back on us. And therefore, collective dreams, we must, of course, take some and leave some. But this is my first observation. We must understand the difference between types of dreams that are collective but profoundly different. Ernst Bloch, a very well-known German philosopher, began his book with an amazing phrase: we must learn to hope. We must learn to hope. We can't just hope. And we must learn to dream. What it counts are awakened dreams, a utopia, the dream of human beings. And we know these dreams because they come from far, very far back in history. We can list them. First of all, peace, then a world that people can live in, and then social justice, etc. So these dreams, it is important that each and every one of this allow them to appear, because they are also self-realizing for each of us, meaning that politicians must ingest and insert a little bit more hope, rather than being always pessimistic. That, people in the media, in the theatre, in the world of cinema, don't only show disaster films. And in particular on the radio and the television and on the social networks, that we find these source of hope, and hoping that we can build on these dreams which can be achieved because they are reasonable. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you for setting this scene, which takes us way back in history and gives us a scene for this round table. Sibyl, you are the boss of one of the largest media groups in France, Radio France. According to them, this world of the media is increasingly fragmented. It is disintegrated in favor of a multitude of stakeholders of variable quality, so that each of us can build a tailored information system. So can we build collective dreams in such a fragmented landscape? Well, we must rise and meet the challenge of this introduction that looks so far ahead. For each generation that has experienced a political or technological revolution, the question was, is it the end of one world? And what will the world be for future generations? An example was Paul Valéry, who said the problem of our period is that the future is no longer what it should have been. And we see that history is not made of miracles, but it's made of human solutions to the problems we face. And in order to dream collectively, we must reeve from the ground and dream of the sky. The ground is something we share. It's common history that roots us in the ground. And today, what is happening and what is contributing to making this pessimism and this impression of tension and fragmentation is really fed strongly is the fact that information itself, as you're inviting me to describe the world of media, information is increasingly fragmented because people find information not only in a single media, but there is a fragmentation of usages and networks. A network such as TikTok is not made to bring people together. It's made to capture people's attention for a short span of time. And the best way of catching people's attention is not to tell the truth, but to elicit anger. We've come from fact-checking to linger-checking. And somebody in the Circle of the Economists did a study, very interesting. It shows that 35% of political tweets in particular are impregnated with a feeling of fear, of anger. And this fragmentation nourishes this anger. And what we're experiencing is an emotional crisis of democracy. But as soon as we remove our political glasses, and we see this in the different registers of our radios, there's a very different understanding of society. There's a foundation called the Essaim Commun, it's the Common Hive, which did a lengthy analysis at the beginning of the year among 3,000 French people, and they asked the question, how is your life and how is your country? Their life was doing very well, the country was doing very badly. And in this dissonance, we can see that there are things that need to be rebuilt. And when we question them in particular on all questions other than politics, we see why the country is not doing well. This country, France, they said France is a paradise filled with people who think they're in hell. Why? Is it because people have the feeling that things are not doing well? Well, it's because it's because in France they're proud of their country. They're angry, they're proud, and they have the impression that the country is not as good as they want it to be. And so there's a sort of collective spill where they say, well, France is not meeting our expectations. And I think that politicians have the means of reviving hope, and there are other political bodies that walk forwards and bring people together. For example, the Olympic Games was a truly federating moment that managed to really bring people together around a real imagination, which was to show what we could do together. Thank you, Sibyl. Stéphane, Sylvie was talking about the Olympic Games. You are the boss of the OM Football Club. You've had a number of lives. You've been the director of a company at the heart of state. And, what we're talking about here with the Football World Cup, sports competitions are one of the rare opportunities in our modern day life where a society, even a whole country, can come together to celebrate and hope. So what lesson can we draw from this experience around sport? And what can we borrow from sports to revive collective dreams in other fields, and in particular political fields? Well, first of all, it is true that sport, football in particular, because that is the most popular sport in the world, is one of the rare opportunities, I believe, to have massive collective communions that transcend all cleavages, be they social, political, The supporters of the French team come from everywhere, from the LFI to the Rassemblement National, and from academics to laborers. And this capacity of bringing together such a broad variety of members of our society is quite extraordinary and quite unique. And so it's interesting to try to understand what is behind this. I believe, first of all, that, as we've already touched upon, in a general landscape which is rather sad, defeatist, declinist, to have a breath of fresh air, a moment where we're happy, excited, and there's emotion and passion. Well, it does so much good, and I think that people, generally speaking, need this. And that is the world, the show world in particular, and sports is one of its expressions. The second thing is that our French people who are criticizing their countries and the country leaders all the time love France when it wins. When we see today, so let's not get ahead of ourselves, but when we see this tremendous excitement around the French team, but it's due to the pride to see our French team playing as it's playing, to come up against all of the big football nations of the world and generate a sort of, a blinding admiration with regard to what they're doing. And so French love France winning France when it wins. And I think that, we can draw this lesson for other areas. We don't have enough areas in which France is a winner. And above all, opportunities to celebrate France that is a winner. And it is a winner in certain areas because, and this is another question, it's the spirit of competition. And once again, this transcends all generations, all areas of activity. But the spirit of competition and, coming up against others, a peaceful confrontation in the framework of sport, creates a level of emotion and therefore joy when you win, which you cannot replace. And if we look at what's behind the stage, in the wings, for example, if we take football, apologize, but be it a national team or a club, we can see that success is built in the long run. It took decades for French football to become the practically reference for football in the world. You're all familiar with the national team's wins in the four or five last World Cups. France today is the first global producer of football players. In the World Cup today, you have more than 100 players in the different national teams that were trained in France. But for them to impose this school of football across the world, it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of investment, a lot of passion. And we don't reiterate this enough. But today, the place that we occupy in the world of football is the result of a very long-term policy which required investments and which today gives us this advantage. Then there are a few key roles. The coach. It's true for the national team. It's true, of course, for a club. The coach's personality, his capacity to make the right choices, to invest, to get people going, makes a difference between a team with very good individual players but which don't have good results and a team that works. And I would also be tempted to say, and here I'm talking about the approach of the club, the fact that each person does what they have to do in the position that is theirs and doesn't try to do their neighbour's job. In a football club, there's the business because it's show business. We have partners, we have sponsors with stadiums, etc. And then there's the sporting part. In the sporting part, there are two key people, the director and the coach, and these two people must work intelligently together in good harmony. The sporting director mustn't try to be the coach, and the contrary neither. And then there's the president. And when you have a president who is a little bit of a sporting director and who also thinks he's a bit of a coach, then generally it doesn't work. So maybe this is also a small lesson. It's not a lesson, but maybe something to meditate on, some food for thought for the distribution of roles, including among our politicians. So what wins? The winning party is a team. It's the group. Each individual does not necessarily mean that the team will win. So it's the force of the strength of the group that counts, and the fact that each of the people in charge, the managers, do what they have to do and don't try to do their neighbour's job. So that, in a nutshell, is what I may modestly say, and go for the blues and OM as well. So, yes, these parallels give food for thought. We'll come back to this. So, Volk, I'm turning to you, one of the main European theatrical directors in Berlin, and you work in Berlin. So this is what we're interested in, is your view as an artist. So as Pierre was saying earlier on, the common feeling is that our society has lost the sense of the collective dream, which was still there a few decades ago. We always had the feeling that before was better, but it seems that if we refer to the years, even the 70s, it was not the case. But you do not agree with this. You say that our dreams are far from over today.
Thank you first for inviting me. I just want to say I also work in France, not only in Berlin. First I want to, sorry, I speak English to you. First I want to talk a moment about my practical work, because I, of course, do see it every day that people are, darker, more depressed, that people are, in a way, challenged with all these crises they are experiencing. And I also experience a lot of people at work, everywhere, my students, but also the actors, who really have difficulties to look ahead in the future, who feel like maybe in 5 years there will be a war, and everything will be destroyed. There's hardly anyone I see that has like a positive look on the future. On the other hand, I also, as an artist, find it very important at the moment that we don't go into full doom mode, that the work we create is in a way also lifting the audience up in these really challenging times without being superficial or without creating, some sort of silly optimism that comes out of nowhere. So we as artists have to describe what is, I think, but at the same time not constantly feed into this narrative of everything is going downhill. And that is actually artistically not so easy. Now, since I'm a writer, I decided actually to write a little text for this, and we'll read this out. It doesn't take very long, but I was first a bit almost annoyed by the question, and I'll let you know why. So I don't think people have stopped dreaming collectively. Everywhere I go, I meet people who want a different world. I meet young people fighting for climate justice, citizens defending democracy, artists continuing to create, despite shrinking budgets, and communities trying to build solidarity in increasingly fragmented societies. The question is not whether collective dreams still exist. The question to me is why our political reality seems so incapable of realizing these dreams. Many people are losing trust in political institutions, not because they have become irrational or cynical, but because they are paying attention. They see governments speaking about freedom, democracy, and human rights, while inequality continues to grow, while authoritarian forces gain strength, and while economic and technological power becomes concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. When international law is defended in only one conflict, but ignored in another, people notice that. When human rights are presented as universal but become negotiable as soon as strategic interests are involved, people notice. When governments ask citizens to defend democratic values while weakening public institutions, reducing cultural budgets, or allowing economic inequality to deepen, people begin to ask what exactly they are being asked to defend. And people see something else happening before their eyes. They see children in Gaza, Lebanon, and Sudan growing up amidst war, displacement, and destruction. They see Western governments expressing concern while continuing to supply weapons, provide political cover, or look away. Whether one agrees on every aspect of these conflicts or not, the contradiction is impossible to ignore. It raises a fundamental question: who is actually allowed to dream about the future and whose future is considered expendable? As a writer and theater maker, I have spent much of my life working on the question how silence works and how silence is fabricated. Families, institutions, and entire societies are organized through silence. Silence is never neutral. It protects someone. Silence creates a power structure. And today, we all observe which voices are amplified, which are marginalized, and which are actively silenced. And this is why I still believe in the power of theater and why I believe theater still matters. Not because it offers solution, because theater rarely offers solutions, but it remains one of the few places where strangers come together, encounter different realities, challenge each other, and imagine futures that do not exist yet. Theater asks us to resist the impulse to judge immediately. It teaches us that listening is not necessarily agreement, that understanding is not surrender, and that conflict is not a football match in which our only task is to choose a side. Democracy depends on exactly this capacity, the capacity to remain in disagreement without turning one another into enemies. And perhaps this is exactly where collective dreams begin, in the willingness to listen to stories that unsettle our own, to defend principles even when they are inconvenient, and to imagine a future in which no child's life is considered less valuable than another's. Without that willingness, democracy becomes a performance. If democracy has a future, it will depend on whether we recover the ability to listen with empathy, to sustain conflict without violence, and to discover that understanding another human being is not a defeat. And this is a dream I would love to share collectively with all of you.
Merci, Fall.
So let me just add one thing, because I really believe that we are heading towards a future with a lot of conflict. There will be a lot of conflict. It will not become less, and it will become more complex. So I think the big question is, how do we learn to deal with conflict without killing each other, without immediately starting a war?
Merci pour votre analyse, pour votre...
Well, thank you for your views and analysis and your views as an artist. Of course, there's hope. That's what we take from that. But the final note is a bit heavy. Anyway, we'll talk about this later on. We'll take questions once we've listened to the mayor of Aix-en-Provence, Sophie Joissin. You're a politician. You're in charge of one of the large cities in France. I'd like to ask you a question, please, Sophie Joissin, which is, wouldn't you say that politicians have a responsibility in this disenchantment of the world? This is what Marcel Gauger was saying. And, because you're in charge, so how can you find the best balance between the management of the world with its imperfections, the world as it is, and a projection towards the world in the way it should be, if we dream? Now, that's tricky, that's difficult, frankly, to be totally honest. But let me tell you something. I believe in what we can do as a group. I believe in our capacity when we are together. What Sybille Veil said earlier, and I agree with her, and she said that the French deeply love their country. They have collective dreams about their country, and yet they are not happy when they see that their country is not winning the battle. And this is very much connected to sports. But today, if you look at the times we live in, it's true that fewer children are born. There are technological breakthroughs that leave some people on the side of the road. And at the same time, geopolitically, everything is changing. The budgets, the national budgets are not really good, which means people fear and they're feeling angst. And it's difficult to anticipate, to think about the future. And I think that this is something which leads to angst and fear in people. Look at France today. Nobody would really say that there's deep recession if we look at us and compare with other countries. And in the world, we are wealthy. People are quite well off, even though, of course, they might have some difficulties. But it's difficult to anticipate, to think about the future, to make projections. That's what's complicated. And this collective dream, well, as long as it's not about the apocalypse, is something that can help us overcome these difficulties, to calm down, and mainly to be in sync with others. Because angst and fear usually divide people. Gérard Collomb, several years ago, said, we are a society of people who live side by side. We shouldn't be a group of people facing each other. Now, to be side by side, I think there are policies that can be rolled out. And it's not just about housing. It's not just about supplies and having shops that are doing well. But it's about dreams, dreams that unite people. And this dream is a dream that I find only in two official policies, which is sports and culture. Because in both cases, we can live together, and those who have different political views, divergent, totally radically different views, can attend the same football match or rugby match and shout together and be happy together. In a similar fashion, if people are listening to a very pleasant concert, either classic music or rap, well, in any way, it's the same. People are in sync. They vibrate together. And these are the keys for people to reunite. These are very important keys so as to overcome the fears that people have every single day. In the town of Aix-en-Provence, we're very lucky, because we have a town and a city that's a cultural city, and a city that focuses on sport. And so people can overcome these obstacles. People can unite. And you can feel it in our society, our community, because we have many demos that are very good, artistic demos and culture. Regardless of the themes, we always have to be demanding. We have to make a special effort. And by the way, this is the first request that we have. And secondly, we have these events in public spaces, and therefore anybody can come. And this is facilitated because it's free. People don't have to pay. It's round the corner. It's close to people. And people share, even though they didn't know each other before. After that, after the event, they recognize people who are different. They don't just think about themselves. And it's very important to unite societies. And before we dream collectively, the first thing is to have a society that's united. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, madam. Now we'll take the questions in a minute. Pierre, I think you wanted to say something. Yeah, I was listening to the different speakers, and I was wondering about something. To have a cohesive approach is essential for a collective dream. But can we have a harmonious system if we don't fight against something? Can we be united if we're not in a team, if you see what I mean? If you're not playing a certain game because you have opponents, you fight against somebody, but you can unite people in a different way. I was thinking about cooperation between people of the craft, the ones who produce objects, who work and cooperate. So what should we do? In France, and everybody says that, there's the strong spirit of competition in the French education system, and, well, those who lived in other countries, or people from other countries who come to France, always say that there's this very marked competition at school where we rate pupils all the time. We give them marks and all that. It's totally different in the Nordic countries, and even in the English-speaking world. Well, it's less pronounced. And also to pick on the question I was asking to you all, that I was asking to myself. Maybe this very marked competition, this strong competition, will lead to the fact that in France, angst is very strong, or anger rather anger, because competition, and competition is important, competition is fundamental, but usually when we talk about competition, we know that some will be left behind, and the vast majority will be left behind, and that's why people are angry. So that's my question to all of you. Now, Stéphane, perhaps we could say, okay, competition is one of the facets of it all. But the other facet could be union, to unite. We have common rules. Which side should we look at? The dark one or the bright one? Well, the moments when we can have a real communion during a competition is a good moment. If we take the example of our dear country, France, a village of villages, politicians don't really give us those many opportunities to be in sync and in harmony. But sports does that, and it's a good opportunity that we always have to seize, regardless of the event. And there are many other human projects or social projects at the level of a country that could be followed by a vast majority of people. For instance, going to space, Thomas Pesquet. Lots of people were following him, and they're proud. And he's not competing with anybody else, with any other astronaut. But he represents an image of France, which is positive, and which really shows that he's got the guts, he's got skills and qualities. And we could say the same about industry or research. We're all proud when we receive a Nobel Prize in France. I met someone, there's someone with a Nobel Prize, a Frenchman who's walking around here. And it's not just competition, it's about success. But when people succeed, they tend to unite people who will follow them more than failure. But since we're talking about France, in our country, we have assets. We have things we do well. Pierre, you were talking about education in France. Usually people criticize the French educational system. Well, of course, there's competition at school. But there are many countries that are looking at us because we have the grandes écoles. They envy our math schools, physics schools with Nobel Prizes, and the tech companies. So it works. The French model works. Anyway, I think, and by the way, it's a good thing that we have many other areas. It's not just in sports that people unite. There are other moments when people gather together and celebrate the collective success. We don't do this enough. We tend to talk about what doesn't work well, and it's always more complicated to talk about what works better. We should do this more. Do we have questions in the room? Not yet. Yes, I think you wanted to say something, Franck.
Yeah, non-French on this panel. I'm just noticing that this discussion is going in a direction of how can we improve the national pride into the French nation. And I don't know if this is the answer to the serious challenges that are ahead of us. You know, I don't think that if all European countries now concentrate on how can we make the Germans prouder of being German and the French prouder of being French, we will actually give an answer to our young people. And as a professor, I'm surrounded by people the age of in their early 20s, and I just see that they do have a feeling that our generation has failed them in a way, that we leave them with a lot of complex problems, but we're not giving political answers. And of course, playing sports and going to a football match can, for some time, let's say, distract you from that. I also want to add that a lot of the times on German television, I see different teams really fighting each other, beating each other up. It's not always very harmonious. It's like, it's also violent. It's the idea is to be better than the other, or to, beat parts of, supporters of another team up. So I'm not sure, if we will really reach young people by telling them, hey, just be proud of France. I mean, I love France. It's a great country. I think it's much nicer to live here than in Germany, but still we all face problems like, climate catastrophe. We're feeling it, and we also have, at the moment, politicians that are, trying to militarize the countries, and we have, people like Mark Rutte from NATO who actually says, yeah, maybe in 5 years we have wars like our grandparents had. How does a young person, develop a positive future vision if you hear all this kind of negative propaganda in a way,
Sibylle.
Sibylle. Yeah, congratulations. Now, there's some type of consensus amongst ourselves, because I think there are moments when we can dream together because we're proud of some people, I don't know, the athletes, or Thomas Pesquet, but in the cultural pantheon for the French, there's Jean-Jacques Goldman, Thomas Pesquet, and Zinedine Zidane. We're proud of them. These are successes, and people unite. These are kind people, and everybody agrees to say that. So we have all the ingredients for a cultural event that can unite us. Yet I have one fear. All of these people are all very nice, but we need to have the infrastructure for people to dream and have the same dream. But today, as I was saying, in 2025, the cinema rooms were showing American blockbusters. And if it's others that give us the common dream, it means we can't dream by ourselves. If it's YouTubers in Dubai that feed us with their dreams for the new generations, we will no longer be able to tell our own collective narrative. And yet France has universal narratives that have been very positive. We did that in the past. We have to be able to do this again. Let me give you an example today. If you look at the international platforms and their competition, the weight that they have, the clout they have, they compete against the national players. And investing in cinema is in proportion to the revenues of the big TV channels. The revenues are going down due to the competition of Netflix or other stakeholders. That means we invest less in the French cinema today. So let's be very vigilant about this, creating a collective dream or imaginary. As you said very clearly, there will be moments when we'll have to solve an economic crisis, but also a civilization crisis. What does it mean to be a human being at the time of AI? And the Pope said the same. Human dignity at the times of AI. And how can we make sure that democracy provides answer at a time when the collective dream is in the hands of a few persons, at a moment when there are more tensions, and therefore the policy making is more difficult. By the way, thank you for what you're doing. It's much more difficult for the politicians today. You have to come up with a consensus view, even though everybody's clashing against everybody else in the world. That's difficult, that's paradoxical, and that we have to find a solution to that today. And now we have to find the common foundation. This is probably the right path to follow, I suppose, Sibylle. Well, there are different paths we can follow. We need to build something else, which is a project for society, something we might have lost a little. And today politicians come up with one-off answers, which will never meet the needs of everybody. But we don't have the feeling that we really have built and designed a real project. We have the impression it's a start and stop type of project. So we have we need to design a project for society. It's not simple today, given the backdrop, but I think it'll be better, because we've seen that in history. We've gone through so many crises sometimes the situations were much more difficult than the ones we're seeing today. And what's difficult is that, for us, is that we thought that the world would last the way it is, forever and ever. And it's not the case. We have the impression that everything is falling down. But society is such that there will be new things that will emerge. So we have to get a grip and move on. We have to unite. We have to also build this project together, everybody bringing their own stones. Now, Pierre, you're an economist. And could we look at the other side of the collective dream, that is improving our own situations? That is, you were talking about the fact that the idea of progress has vanished, or the collective dream has vanished. Has it not vanished because, right or wrong, people no longer have the feeling that their own personal situation is improving, or that their children's situation will be better than theirs? So you see, it's about projections about yourself, your life, and your children. Don't you think that this has an impact on the collective dream? Pierre, you're not saying much. The answer is, well, of course there are cycles. There's this dialectic between reality and the imagination. And I see that hope and dreams and the collective dream, as I was saying earlier on, is a self-prophecy. And it'll become a reality if you believe in it. But also, I can say that even these dreams you make when you're awake, even those dreams, if they're not realized, if they do not become a reality, then people will feel angry. And so if it doesn't come to any fruition, people will be disappointed. And if people are disappointed, they'll be angry. And then it gets even worse. So a dream is also something very dangerous. If you make people dream, for instance, during, let's say, the elections, if you make people dream, if you say, pure chance, if you say, my enemy is finance, okay? Right. And my enemy is finance. If those who vote realize that my enemy is not really finance, what might happen is that they might be disappointed and they might be therefore angry. This is true for the mayors. The mayors do the same. They are elected, they make promises. I know that Jacques Chirac, a former president, was saying that, okay, promises are all nice, but it's a promise for those who are listening to them. That's all. Oh no, Pasqua was saying this, but anyway, it's not a commitment for those who make these promises, but those who hear these promises. But it's interesting, you know, I think it's important, this thing I'm saying, because I see clearly as well that between being united against something or someone and being united because we're together from within, if I can say, there's an interesting trend to try and understand, which is a bit dangerous as well. And let me give you an example. I was thinking about something during the French Revolution. We were saying, vive la nation, long live our nation. Well, that's splendid, is it not? But vive la nation, long live our nation, was something that was gathering people together. People would unite to build a nation, to build a society. And everybody agrees on this. Well, this changed. During the 19th century, the feeling was that of nationalism, and that meant against others. And this is a fatal mistake. And now we have to understand how we can go from one to the second. Those who dream about being united, well, their dreams might be something dangerous later on, down the road. That's what I was thinking about. Well, that will be the final word, because we no longer have time. And by the way, we're going to listen now to the one who's going to be making us dream collectively. The Prime Minister is going to be here in 5 minutes. Thank you very much for being with us.